Good morning, everybody. Good morning. And welcome to Manchester. Welcome to TIP Live. My name's Janet Greenwood. I'm a director at KPMG in the Major Infrastructure, Major Projects Advisory Practice. I'm a fellow of the ICE and I'm going to be your moderator this morning, so welcome. This is the fourth TIP Live event, and we are delighted to again be co-locating with Interchange UK. So what is TIP Live? TIP Live is a series of events convened by the Infrastructure Projects Authority, the Infrastructure Client Group, the Construction Leadership Council and the National Infrastructure Commission. It's hosted by the Institution of Civil Engineers and organised in collaboration with Meetings of Minds. Thank you to all of them for their support in developing and putting on this event. So TIP Live aims to catalyse transforming infrastructure performance and put the vision into practice. So what can you expect from today? Well, this afternoon will be chaired by ICE President Anusha Shah, who will discuss leadership and influencing behaviours, including the role of design champions, how to design and procure infrastructure and use technology and innovation to achieve decarbonisation, efficiency and productivity while meeting societal needs. And that emphasis on behavioural change and culture is so important. We have the tools, we have the technology. What we need is the behavioural change and the leadership to drive that forwards. I often say that in the 90s we had scope, cost, risk and time, and that felt hard enough. And now we've got 4 new priorities of biodiversity and nature, social value, resilience and adaptation, carbon and the environment, air, water, waste. And we have to now think about all 8 priorities at once, whether it's collecting data, reporting, making decisions, putting key clauses into procurement or into designs, setting the ambition. It has to be across all 8. And that means that we all need to change what we do in our jobs, to be bold and support others who are being bold if we are going to deliver the change that we must deliver for society and meet the climate and biodiversity crises. But back to this morning. We have got a great lineup of presenters and speakers to hear about how TIP's principles can be implemented into procurement, into design and still deliver on those societal, environmental and economic goals. We're also going to hear updates from the public-private roundtables that we hosted in TIP Live 3 back in November in London last year. So, without any further ado, allow me to introduce our keynote speaker, Stephen Dance. So Stephen is the Director of Commercial Advisory Team at the IPA. The Commercial Advisor Team provides advice to HM Treasury, Cabinet Office and government departments to improve the performance of project delivery in infrastructure, enterprise and growth, and public and security services. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Morning all. In my life, Janet, saying somebody's bold is you've gone to a minister and say, that's very bold, minister. It basically means you're as mad as a hatter. So in the civil service Mandarin, which I'm about to speak to you in, you'll have to work out what it is that I'm really trying to say. So I'm Stephen Dance. As Janet said, I'm a part of the Infrastructure and Projects Authority. I was actually in the room when TIP was first conceived. I've watched it grow and I've every now and again given it a bit of help, but actually it is now a thing, a real thing that is on people's lips and that we are intending and aiming to make as business as usual. So I thought as I was in Manchester, I thought I'd try a bit of culture. I don't know how it's going to go down. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. Romeo and Juliet. the sort of conflicts that go around that. So TIP is just a name. Transforming infrastructure performance is the thing that we're trying to do. It's a helpful badge, TIP. It's shorthand, and we use it in government and we use it in industry, like MMC and various other badges that we like to put on things. But it's not really the name that matters. It's the things that we're going to do. It's the real essence of what it is that we're going to do. So the objective, our objective, my objective would be to say for TIP to become a bit of an anachronism, really, a sort of quaint word of history. And the reason for that is because it is so obvious and so much a part of the warp and weft of the way in which we do business and the way in which we deliver infrastructure on the ground, that we no longer need to have the badge and wear it. There'll be other badges, there'll be new things to do instead. I love this slide. I've always loved this slide, and it stands the test of time. So I continue to put it up because it just describes what is necessary for transforming infrastructure performance, building readiness for the future. And it draws that direct line of sight between the UN sustainability goals at the top and the impact on the built and natural environment at the bottom of this, what I call the lighthouse. I just call it the lighthouse slide because it looks like a lighthouse. And the decisions that we need to take to make that line of sight real. And if actually we keep that very simple philosophy, actually, that value-led, data-driven project delivery is fundamental to what we do, to get the best out of public spending, to get the best out of industry participation. But just drawing that line of sight between the citizen benefits, the decisions that we take and the impact that they have is really, I think, where we need to be focusing. And once we focus on that, if you focus on that very simple philosophy, actually some of the words, some of the difficult badges that we put around the names that we call things, and I'll come on to some of those in a minute, become actually much easier to understand. And the principle of being bold, or maybe just a bit innovative, or actually doing the right thing becomes much easier to understand, because it is actually a very straightforward concept. It's pretty difficult, however, as we are all discovering, to put into practice. So, transforming infrastructure performance, doing what it takes there, is a complex method of working, but actually I think we can break that down, and we will have various sessions in this morning that break that down into the value proposition, industrialization, and productivity. And I'm just going to spend a little bit of time saying what those words mean to me. Value, we need to look at through the lens of the citizen at the top of the lighthouse. So if we look at the value proposition, why is it that we're going to build something new? Why is it that we're going to trade off the impact on the built environment or the natural environment with that citizen benefit? Look at value that we are all creating through that citizen lens. Don't look at it always through we must have a new railway or a new road or a new power station or a new carbon capture unit or a new hospital or a new school. Look at it through the lens and say what we must have is something that works for the citizens of the United Kingdom in the totality. And that leads you to the systems thinking, the systems within systems that we're good at talking about, but we're not always good at implementing. And so often, and there are loads of examples that I could bring here, but they might be a bit controversial, so I probably won't, of where we've said, look, we're going to do this, we're going to build this, or we're going to adopt this policy of regulation, or we're going to adopt this policy of planning, but actually we don't really think through what that means for the system and the value, the overall value that we're creating. So think of it in that context. That's not just a government thing, by the way. That is something for industry and the CLC and the National Infrastructure Commission and everybody else that is involved in this endeavour to think about together. Industrialisation is a strange word. I was sitting in my hotel room last night thinking that actually, I was thinking, how do I explain industrialisation? Well, it's obviously, you make things in a factory and you assemble them on site. That sounds a lot like brick making to me, and bringing them in a lorry to be assembled on site. So what do we actually mean by industrialisation? Now, others today are going to come into this in much more depth than I'm going to go into it. But actually, we need to really unpack that word. What does it actually mean to industrialise our supply chains? Is it the kit of parts? Is it the modularisation of things so that So I'll give you one example, which is nothing to do with the government, you'll be pleased to know. So I went to the new Schwarzman Centre in Oxford, where I live, the other day on a trip organised by somebody else, and I watched them with their panelised construction, stone, factory-built panels and modules coming in. We didn't really talk about cost. We didn't really talk about modern methods of construction per se, because it wasn't anything to do with the government, so we weren't putting badges on things. What we did talk about was the benefit of the reduction in lorry journeys to people living in the centre of the city, which is where this is being built, which was very, very significant. It was like, from memory, 20% of the number of lorry journeys that it would normally have been. So those are the sorts of benefits that we can look at if we look at it through the citizen lens. And then productivity, well, look, there's enough written and said about productivity without me having to explain what it means. But we have to find a way of getting more for less. And I rather fear at the moment we are too much in the mindset of getting less for more, because things are more expensive, inflation has hit, we haven't got money, we haven't got economic growth that we wanted to generate, and that is slower than we wanted it to be. So we have to find a way of getting that productivity there. So here are 6 things that I would say, once we can work in these areas and we can sort of say we've adapted those principles in these areas, we can say that transforming infrastructure performance has happened. It is part of business as usual. And it means that government and industry and the academics and others in the stakeholder environment have a common cause to draw that direct line between citizen benefit and the impact on the built environment. And I'm probably running slightly short of time. Am I? I have no idea how long I've been talking for. Yes, I'm running short of time. How long do you want me to be? 30 seconds or 3 minutes? 30 seconds. Oh, questions. Good, I can do questions, yeah. So the 30-second version of this is just look at those, I think there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things on the slide. And think about what they actually really mean. Not the words that are there, but what does it mean to have a workforce with the right skills, delivering safe products and working in a safe environment. Because I would sort of say when you unpack that, actually, we've not always provided safe buildings, and we've not worked in a safe environment. So there's a lot to do, and if you unpack each of those sections in that sort of slightly forensic way, there'll be a lot to do and a lot to concentrate on later on this morning.
So I'd like to open the floor now for questions. I don't know if you've got a roaming mic. I think I was told that we would have a roaming mic. until we get here we go, here's the roaming mic, it's just coming, thank you very much. If you'd like to briefly just say your name and the organisation that you come from, we'll just have a couple of questions. Just while we're waiting for the mic, I know that there's a lot been spoken about, Stephen, about skills. We know that last year was the first year that we went over 1.5 degrees as an average. What kind of skills are we going to need to meet these new climate and biodiversity crises?
There's a long answer and a short answer. We will need very different skills in some areas, and in some areas we're going to use the same skills but with, I think, different technologies and a different mindset. So clearly there are areas, so for example, if you took something like carbon capture and storage, we're going to have to develop that as a mechanism, and we're going to have to put those facilities in place. So there's a lot of planning and design work and new skills around that we will need to develop and we will need to know. Same, I think, with new nuclear. I mean, have we got enough of those sort of specialist skills to enable us to design and then put into construction those facilities? Probably not. But then there's also quite a lot of what you might call traditional skills that we're going to have to relearn or retrain and repurpose into what we're going to now badge modern methods of construction. But that has a whole set of subsectors underneath it.
Thank you, Stephen. Do we have the mic?
Thanks. David Coles, Chief Engineer, Department for Transport. Hello, Stephen. Would you agree that productivity improvement doesn't just mean reducing the number of people on a building site? It is also about tackling the indirect costs, the armies of people we seem to now employ in porter cabin cities and in offices elsewhere, which means that these days the indirect costs, which are, let's not face it, are essentially people, are at least 100% on top of our direct costs.
Yeah, I'd like to say two things. I mean, of course I agree. I've never knowingly disagreed with you, I don't think. So, but yeah, look, there's two things to say about this. I mean, one is the National Infrastructure Commission have started a review of infrastructure costs. I think that is a very welcome thing to do. I'm sure they're talking to a number of people here. The IPA in a previous iteration did a very similar thing in 2010. I think this sort of ability to surround any project or program with lots of indirect costs, lots of redesign, lots of recosting, and sort of checking the checkers type facility is definitely something that we would say we need to look at. But it is not just about, I don't think, this whole discussion about cost. It's actually about really getting to the heart of the value proposition and then working out how you want to go about delivering that. So yes, I would agree, but I want to sort of try and shift the mindset away from this is just about infrastructure costs delivery and into it's about benefit and value creation as much as it is about cost.
Stephen, thank you. Really insightful. Always a pleasure to hear from the IPA. Thank you.
Good. I'm sorry, I forgot to give MOJ a plug for doing TIP really well, which I was told to do, so I'm doing it now, and they are genuinely doing that with a lot of maturity. So that'll come out later on as well.
Thank you. And I'm going to give a pre-plug to the Bentley ebooks, which I'll be mentioning later, but they will summarise the tip of... thank you, Stephen. Summarise the tip in November, where MOJ got a great shout out. So thank you very much, Stephen. I'd like now to welcome to the stage Sarah Humber, who is Director in the Commercial Advisory Team at the IPA, and also Andrew, who is a Programme Director at Balfour Beatty. They're going to be talking about culture and production thinking.
Thank you, Janet. So the first question is, why are we here today? Well, if you've looked at your programme, we're not here to to do a deep dive into platforms and MMC to start with. We're here to ask not an existential question, but who am I to be standing up in front of you talking about culture and relationship between the public and private sector? Well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Humber, a commercial advisor in the IPA. I'm a practicing commercial PPP lawyer with many years of experience of both advising on and delivering major social infrastructure projects. You may think that having experience in procuring privately financed projects furnishes me with a wholly unhelpful set of expertise, bearing in mind recent coverage surrounding expiry and handback and continual media scrutiny and criticism. However, you may be surprised to hear that I care hugely about changing the way we do things to drive growth and investment in all sectors, but specifically in social infrastructure. Within IPA, as well as working closely with the Project Futures team, a subset of my work is with my colleague Jennifer Charlson, and unfortunately she can't be here today, and she was due to be on the panel, and I'm going to give her a little shout out because she had a little argument with the pavement, tripped over, and concrete one, Jennifer 0. So unfortunately she can't be here, but I'm part of this group with Jennifer, which is a cross-public-private sector group of like-minded individuals who give up their time for free in the public sector, consultants, people from industry, and we're working together to establish what needs to be true in order to change the dial on how infrastructure is procured and delivered. We've held a number of round tables with a wider group on industrialisation and platforms, and we're keen to do more than reiterate the problem statement. We want to provide a route map to make changes that can allow the industry to thrive through collaboration and collegiality, which makes transforming infrastructure performance principles just simply second nature. So, why do I think it's about culture? I like the word culture, but not in its naming sense, but instead the verb. The definition for me is about creating the right environment for things to thrive. But you have to keep that environment continually stocked with all the good elements that allow it to continue to thrive. So you are maintaining the thing in conditions suitable for growth. Those conditions may need to change over time as the thing matures, but you must react to keep the conditions fertile to support growth. Learn what is needed, don't leave it in the dark or put toxic elements that prevent growth. So here's a quick history lesson. This has been reiterated a lot, but it's still relevant. January 1994, the Latham Report, identifying disharmony, recommending a move towards partnering and collaboration between the client and construction business. We are 30 years on, and although we have the construction playbook and various other publications and presumptions in favour of MMC, we're stuck. And two key elements which I think are crucial to changing the dial are early supply chain involvement and an outcomes-based approach. So, what's the problem statement? I said I didn't want to reiterate it, but I am going to just briefly before I move into what I think might help change. The way that we currently deliver our social infrastructure is inefficient and too often based on delivery of bespoke outputs in sector and project silos. This engineer-to-order approach leads to inefficiency and unpredictability in design, production, logistics, assembly, and prevents continuous improvement. We need to drive solutions with greater commonality in parts, processes, and people across programs and pipelines, balancing the benefits of standardization and continuous improvement with the need for choice and variety in our outputs. Through industrialized approaches, we can drive better social, environmental, and economic outcomes from what we deliver and how we deliver it. So the problem statement, fragmented execution, multiple departments have independently developed approaches which have led to overlapping and inconsistency. Varied and conflicting requirements create a confusing narrative in the marketplace, hindering an ununified adoption of methodologies. The market's lost confidence in the published pipeline. Fluctuations cause overdemand or excess capacity. Programmes are competing for resource, inability to create alignment against common outcomes, and a lack of long-term commitment to pipeline. Failure to address capacity and capability gaps, failure to provide consolidation and consistency in communication, and unpredictable spend patterns. They all disrupt project cycles. So how can we move from uncertainty to uniformity? Standardisation, we say this a lot, ensures more consistent profiling, smoothing demand cycles. Predictability offers clarity on funding, allocation, timings and amounts. Prioritisation, focus on the areas that deliver greatest impact. Innovation, clear requirements and expectation setting. Efficiency, enhances resource allocation and project delivery speed. So how do we move from distrust to harmony? If we started with a collaborative culture, we would create the right environment to help more innovative and sustainable approaches to thrive, to trust that the private sector wants to do a good job as much of the public sector, and there is a great deal of pride and care put in on both sides. So predictable processes mend stakeholder trust, ensuring resource stability. Collaborative environments allow for complex discussions to take place without allocation of blame or liability. But we're caught in a trap. We can't go on together with suspicious minds. Thank you, Elvis. So we should look at challenging the traditional processes and mindsets. And I'd just like to say this is my personal view, not a view of central government. But we should look to challenge these traditional processes regarding when to engage contractors. Industrialisation needs a modern business case approach, and the present timing of SOC, OBC, FBC contracting and investment decisions seem to prevent opportunities for investment and growth. Our traditional processes do not fit with advanced manufacturing designs and off-site manufacture pre-commencement on site. I need a thing. I need a school, a hospital, a prison. I'll do a SOC. How much is it going to cost? Not sure. Let's just write a number back. That's about right. Put that on the back of a fag packet. And that cost envelope set at the beginning becomes the anchor for our project. Oh, I know. I better get some people in, some consultants in to help me design it. Okay. And then I better do an OBC, because I need to do an OBC to be approved before I can go out to procurement, and that needs to go through Treasury and Cabinet Office spend controls. I'll do that. Oh, I need some people to build the thing. I better procure them, and a digger. And then, oh, hello, at this point, REBA 3 design chucked over the fence to contractors. 70% of the opportunity of an industrialised approach to influence design choices have been lost. And then I have to do an FBC. And then we sign a contract, and if we're lucky, we have champagne. But at the end of the day, all of those things that go into that contract, so many of the opportunities have been lost. Actual costs very often differ extremely from the cost envelope set at SOC. We get a thing, but probably it's had to be value engineered, and it isn't built quite as well as we'd want it to be sustainable and have all of the things and good things that we need in order to have net zero carbon buildings. So maybe in a new world of a modern business case process, we could change this so that I need a thing. These are all the things I need to do before I start. I need to think about grouping projects together, standardising, portfolio managing, preparing on my documentation, consulting on my documentation, creating incentive strategies, open book pricing strategies, encouraging the market to feedback in consultation, and prepare to contract over a longer period. Gather the data, hone and improve, and be an intelligent client on the public sector side. Be a credible public sector counterparty to the private sector. And then all those things happen together. You procure a strategic alliance with designers, engineers, contractors to inform the SOC and the OBC and the cost envelope as it develops. Industrialisation decisions to do with, for example, MEP, which can drive so much of the cost of complex buildings, can be made much earlier. And we get a thing which hopefully is within budget. So what's the problem with changing established processes? Well, I've put a lawyer up there, but as I am one, they can be different, they can be other sorts. So what about procurement challenge? What about the rules? What about the checks and balances? What about the risk allocation? What about demonstrating value for money? Well, what are the potential benefits from creating the right culture and processes for industrialised solutions to thrive? If we establish the right environment to culture, to foster collaboration and trust, we can partner and collaborate better. We can work together to establish values and outcomes. We can create jobs. We can improve health and safety in construction sector resilience. We can reduce waste. We can increase productivity. Direct productivity gains in the construction market are worth 1.8 billion per annum. Building quality, sustainability buildings improve lives, help tackle climate change. And there are GDP impacts and wider benefits both in the construction market and beyond the construction sector. So my final slide is about continuous improvement. We establish a culture of mutual respect and trust. Challenge and change established processes that hinder progress. Challenge and identify what needs to be improved and honed, and continuously improve and repeat. The virtuous circle. Thank you.
Coming straight up, all right? No questions later. Okay. Hi. Thanks. Yes, excellent. Good afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon. Hi. Yeah, hi, that'll do. Hi, yeah, I'm Andy Dosworth. I work for Balfour Beatty. I lead our transformation programme in our highway sector. And you've got me for the next 2 to 3 hours talking about productivity. I'll try and get us back on track with timing. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about what we call productivity in highways is production thinking, and it's really a build on what Sarah said. How do we get that culture? What can we do when we have the opportunity to get left? Because we have a fantastic client in National Highways. They're already allowing us to get left. We're already being able to get into that position to look and plan for productivity. So I'm going to talk about the problem of humans. That's a small subject, but we'll get into that. But before we do, I'd like to make a confession. That confession is that I love my job. I really do. Because I get to meet great people, I get invited to do presentations like this, but also I get the opportunity to harness what could be good about construction. I'm fascinated by the opportunity that is given by improving productivity. And it might seem like an impossible task, and Stephen said there's been so much written about it. Do you know what? There's too much written about it. It's complex, it's difficult, it's insurmountable. It's a wicked problem, as they call it. And we've got to get better. So how do we simplify it? What do we get if we ask, what is productivity? I'm boiling it down to being really simple, because if you know me, or you've worked with me, or you've seen this presentation, you'll see it's simple, right? Productivity is efficiency times effectiveness. When you boil it down into simply, we can all take ownership of that. Complexity is now gone, okay? This is an opportunity for everybody to get involved. One without the other doesn't work. If you have efficiency, but you don't really focus too much on effectiveness, that's your cost cycle. That's going down to the bottom. If you just focus on effectiveness, your cost could spiral out of control. So you have to be competitive. But this isn't just Balfour Beatty. This goes up and down. This is through the entire hierarchy of the project portfolio or program lifecycle. 70% of what Balfour Beatty does is done by our amazing supply network. And they work across with other tier ones in other sectors. So when we start talking about, are we being efficient, are we being effective, we can make it happen throughout that hierarchy. It's also exponential and it's also self-fulfilling. But I'm going to get into that bit shortly. So transforming infrastructure, performance, tip, it's amazing. It's an opportunity for us to grab hold of and ignite that cultural shift. Sarah talked about culture, I think it's absolutely right. It is a cultural shift. We won't get what we want by doing the things we've done before. We have to change that. We have to go from construction to production. We are at an unprecedented level of change. There is technology coming at us, the need for digital, and a level of complexity that we have never seen before. It's never been this fast. I don't think it's ever going to be this slow again. Also, we're all humans. So we have to humanize what we're doing because it's people who are going to make the changes. And if it doesn't reel to people, we're not going to succeed. Humans are amazing, intricate, and complex. And when we say don't do something, don't think of an elephant, it's really difficult to not think of an elephant, right? If you're a skier, you ski and you go down a run and you've got trees either side, don't look at the trees. It's very likely that you're going to have an intimate relationship with a tree quite soon. When you learn to ride a bike or a motorbike, which is even more peril, you're taught not to look at the manhole. The manhole's wet. Don't look at the manhole because you get target lock. Right? You've got to look through the corner. Okay, sorry, why am I telling you about skiing and riding motorbikes? What's the construction context? The construction context is we have to look at what's within our zone of control, what's within our zone of influence, and what's within our zone of concern. Pipeline is a fantastic example, often held up as the blocker to better productivity. Do you know what it is, right? But it's way into the zone of concern. As a constructor, it's over there. And when I think about it that way, it depowers me, it takes away my energy. It stops me from being able to do anything about it. It's inside my zone of concern. Another thing that's held up is every project is unique. Yeah, every project is unique at a macro level. Under the skin of it, we build great infrastructure as an industry every day with repeat processes. Again and again and again. We know all the data points. We know the resources. We know the materials. We know the productivity. We've got a BIM model which has got attributed data in it. It's all there for us. So we've got to find our way of releasing all of that. And if we start to look for the snow, if we start to look through the corner, we see the route to a lot of activity that gets released for us to go at. And we're not looking at the blockers anymore. We've got the cultural shift. We're now in a space which is allowing us to be productive. It empowers us. It allows us to take control, take things from concern to influence and into control. Roll on production thinking. That's what that's doing for us. It's going to bring. I'm going to talk through now what that is and how that's bringing to life inside a contractor. So it's not just another construction methodology. It is a mindset. Its key measure is productivity, improving productivity, innovative delivery, and getting better predictability. Now, this is a virtuous cycle, which I really love, by the way, Sarah. So, if I can explain that better, when you focus on productivity, is the activity efficient? Is it effective? That's absolutely key. Well, that helps me get better predictability. A process which has better predictability is a process improving in control. Processes that are in control are processes that you can improve upon. You improve on that process, you improve productivity, that gives you better predictability, and you see you go round. It's the thing that unites every single element of our project lifecycle. Are we efficient? Are we effective? And it's simple, and we can all do it. So, 6 elements to production thinking. The first is method-led. We do this with National Highways. You get left, as far left as possible. I want a thing, get the constructor involved, because that thing, we can really help. And the idea is here that we make decisions before we design, and therefore we say how we're going to build it, and if we know how we're going to build it, we design that way. We did this on the A57 Mottram bypass, and we took 50% of carbon out of the job, £2.1 million worth of saving, and took 12 weeks off the programme before we'd even designed it. Then we started to get into the design, and it reduces your iteration cycles of your design. It's fab, we should be definitely doing it, but we are doing it. MMC, Modern Method Construction, let's get a badge out there. If you want to go on a journey, you need to know where you're going, and you need to know where you are. And you need to be, everyone on your project to be at the same start line. Even get them into the same stadium can be difficult, but get everyone to the start line. We have built, with National Highways, a framework for civils infrastructure in modern method construction, which allows us to understand where we are, set targets of where we want to get to, and give us the easily recognisable steps to get there. When you've got a framework, you know where you want to get to, you can innovate. You can innovate with purpose. Innovation is the third pillar. When we're brilliant at coalescing around a problem in construction. Give us a problem, we'll jump on it. But a problem is too immediate. When you've got a framework, like the MMC framework that we've done with National Highways, and you know where you want to get to, you can innovate in the asset that you need to, not for now, probably not even for near, but for future. And it gives you the time. Research and development takes time. Getting stuff certified takes time. We have to accept that. We can get it better, but we've got to innovate with enough time period to do it. So we know big, hairy, audacious goals like zero carbon bridge, Lower Thames crossing, 60% reduction in carbon, 49 modular structures. These things are happening now. We're tackling those problems right now. The remaining 3, they'll be straightforward. You'll recognise them all. Right first time, everything's got to be right first time. But don't let that inhibit us, right? We should experiment, we should rehearse, we should practice. So when we do build the real thing, we do get it right first time. And digital and BIM allows us to do that. A lean mindset, another badge. We need to badge things like lean at the moment because it isn't necessarily in our culture yet. It isn't natural for what we do. But we do 2 things. We do little lean and we do big lean. So little lean, 2.5 years ago, we had 2 lean managers in Balfour Beatty. We've now got 18 lean engineers. We are serious about looking at our processes and making them better, but iteratively. Now that's little lean. What little lean does is it exposes the big areas for big lean. So you can do major changes that you need to do, and you can focus on those changes, bring in your innovation as you need to. And then finally, nothing happens without digital transformation. Digital is a cost to us at the moment. It needs to become a benefit. And we'll only get it by supporting all of the other 5 pillars and making this absolutely flow. So that is production thinking. Those 6 pillars that come together to create joy. So what I didn't say at the beginning was, at the end of this, I was going to provide a little secret for your takeaway of how you unlock productivity. And that secret is that nothing's new. I have not presented anything new to you today. You know it all. The secret is productivity is a decision that you can make. You can decide to make sure you're more efficient and effective, whether it's an activity you do today, whether it's a program of work, whether it's a business. It's over to you. Thank you.
Andy and Sarah, if you'd just like to come and sit down for a moment, and we'll just do some quick questions. So again, there is a roving mic. If you would like to ask a question of Sarah and Andy, do put your hand up and the mic will come to you. And if you can say your name and your organisation. So we do have someone down the front. Do we have someone on the mic? Yeah, the mic is just coming. Thank you so much. So we've just got 5 minutes for a few questions. Thank you.
Hi, Alex Binder, Programme Manager in the rail sector with Network Rail. Touching on all three of the comments that were, or the talks that went ahead really. So Stephen talked about system of systems thinking. So obviously systems are elements with interconnections that share a functional purpose. And the industry was one of those key elements. How do you make the industry or encourage the industry to become a focused, purpose-driven element within that system of systems? And I'm thinking about contracting, the way we contract, the transactional nature of contracts, the competitive nature of contracts. And I would use the contract that was used to deliver T5, Terminal 5 at Heathrow, that very specific contract that was devised to deliver that, which was a major £5 billion programme of work that was delivered on time and on budget that we don't seem to see elsewhere in the industry. Rather than the sound bites of fantastic events like this, how do we actually move forwards, make progress and deliver results?
Thank you. Can I come to Sarah first of all?
Yes, well, I mean, the Terminal 5 example is fascinating, and I think there are other examples with what MOJ has done, and I think, mandating from the centre the construction playbook, and because everything that's in there in terms of early contractor involvement, collaborative alliancing, is the right answer to how we're going to move forward, because otherwise we perpetuate the cycle of it being a buyer's market and the race to the bottom, and then a seller's market, and then we lose appetite to engage in complex projects. So I think the key is that we have to start policing the construction playbook. I hate using that phrase; it's awful, but and actually say, this is the way you should be contracting on these major projects. And with the sort of the advent of the ability to analyse costs and pricing and open book pricing, we know what things cost. And if they've gone up in price because they just physically have, because you can't get people or you can't get things, although within the constraints of whatever money we can physically get our hands on, it shouldn't stop a project. It shouldn't leave people at the centre just scratching their heads and going, what should we do? Actually, we need to work together. And yes, I am a commercial lawyer, but that collaborative arrangement whereby, yes, we know what's in the contract, but if we can work out solutions together, because we all really want the same thing at the end. So I think there's something in policing construction playbook, embedding it into early procurements is really important.
Sarah, thank you. Andy, any comments from yourself?
Terminal 5, I used to work nights on there, on the taxiways, fond memories. I think it's sector driven. I think you start at sector. So highway sector, let's take that. National Highways has set us really challenging targets, and they set them out in the contract, and then so whether it's Lower Thames Crossing, which is you're going to build this thing, through to a framework like the Regional Development Programme, which is a whole bunch of work. But once you're on the framework, you're not tendering, you're allocated the work based on your performance. So hard measures, difficult, but a really collaborative nature. And then we get to work with the other tier ones. So when we see good practice on another project, we can go to that project and say, how's that going? And that's not in the contract. That is our behaviours, because we all want to do really well. We want the next scheme to be allocated based on fairness, because look how we've done. So there's two things there. There's the sector or the client that's leading that sector, plus our choice to be better.
I think there's also, I think the digitisation of project delivery is where the opportunity will be, where that collaboration is, that data sharing piece. Where you then start to see best practice, what works.
Agreed.
Lovely. Andy, Sarah, thank you ever so much. Really insightful, really interesting, particularly around those carbon reductions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So before we move on to our next session, I will just give a shout out to the Bentley ebooks that I mentioned earlier. There are 3 of them. There are QR codes. I don't know if we have the slide ready to go up. They will be linked on the ICE website after this event. You'll be able to get the QR code from the Bentley stand. These are brilliant ebooks which summarise some of the previous events we've held around TIP. Are really easy to use in a great format, so do check those out. There we go. Okay, thank you again, Sarah and Andrew. We're moving into our next session. We're going to have 3 5-minute talks. We're going to be initially speaking about value. That's going to be K-Tor and Gaynor Tennant. Then we're going to be speaking about productivity, Mark Worrell and Fergus Harradence. And then about platforms and industrialisation, Jennifer and Ron. We will do questions at the end, so do save them up. And to start, Kay and Gaynor, please do come to the stage.
So, delivering value. Where should we start? Sarah's kindly set this up for me by talking about culture, so let's bring it closer to home. We don't often talk about people outside of this room when value is so subjective. We don't talk about what we value. I often hear that social and environmental outcomes becomes neglected because everything else isn't what we need it to be. But having a shared vision is a good start. We collectively agree that we need an outcomes-led sector. But has this been built into our core beliefs and values of every individual? If it isn't, I fear that it will untangle when the pressure mounts. On a project, these goals become not my problem. Because as humans, we revert to old habits under pressure. So we must condition habits that aligns with what we want to achieve. So we have to start with our values. We've got to want this, use the UN SDGs as a guide and build it into everything that we do and the way that we do it. Making this our responsibility, we can all look inwards now. What do you value? Invest in yourself and support each other to break down those barriers and create the culture that you need, that your team needs. And as organizations, value people and foster a culture that empowers. Ask the question, can your employees reflect their values in the way that they work? Do they feel safe? But what do you do if you're a new entrant project manager at the bottom of the food chain, stuck between clients that don't know why they want what they want, commercial teams that undersell your projects by 50%, suppliers that demand certainty, and management that wants to translate every penny into profit to make their bottom line look pretty for the month? Let the buck stop with you, because you have a choice to flow down those pressures to your team or to create an enabling environment that allows your team to grow, to build resilience, have that shared vision and values to unlock the headspace for creativity and innovation. It's easier if you know what you value. We can all be doing better now with what we've already got. So start here. The NAO recently released a report on Friday, actually, that we can all start looking at projects. What is the difference that you want to make and the value that you want to produce rather than project that you want to do. So let's not overcomplicate it. Let's just make every action count. If we do that now, then everything else falls into place. Delivering sustainably, productively becomes the default. And if you still don't know where to start, then start with compassion, because we can't wait for things to go our way. What we do today, tomorrow, over the next couple of years, will dictate if we realize a climate scenario that is worse than predicted, or if we are actually able to adapt and build resilience to endure what's to come. And if we can do that, then maybe when we all come together, we can drive meaningful progress. Because over the coming months, we'll be building on the early findings, bringing people together to address key challenges. Do you think there's a part to play for everyone?
So I guess it's really hard standing here in front of everybody, because I come from very, very small SME background. And I sit on the coal face of the SMEs, and they're trying to do things better, and they're innovating, and they've got great products, and they're trying to change the sector. But it's not ultimately them that can make the change without everybody in this room today. And I feel like we're preaching to the converted. You're all here because you all are driving that change. So I think Kay and I have sat and we've talked and talked and talked the last few weeks, is what needs to happen, and I think you're going to hear it a lot today. It's that behavioural and cultural shift. And I think value is really hard to relate to. We've had years and years of doing things at lowest cost. So what we need to do is relate it to our everyday lives. If you can take an example in your everyday life that has mattered to you, that has changed the way you think, and you can apply that in your workplace. And not only can you apply that to your workplace, you can apply that to the people in your workplace, because they're the people that are going to make the change. As much as we stand here today, it's not going to be us that transform the construction sector. We're going to lay the groundwork, as everybody has done, from all the reports. I think the first one I've got is 1934 onwards. And then we're going to put layers and layers of complexity on it. But value isn't complex. It's the things that matter innately to us. It's our society, it's our people, and it's our planet. And if we don't start putting those first, we won't have a construction sector to work in. So I think it's about people, it's about culture, and it's about collaboration.
And the critical part will be the connections that you make outside of this hall and what you take away, the actions that you take with your teams, your colleagues, and your value chain. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Mark.
I'm the Deputy Director for Construction in the Department for Business and Trade.
Sorry, that felt like a little bit of a sort of double act we were doing there, but it is. So we're just going to run through now the productivity work stream under TIP and all the linkages that it has with everything else we've heard today and what you're going to be hearing. But the words up there, it's all about practical action. We didn't want anything around this to be a talking shop. It wants to be practical actions that everybody can take. Hence, really pleased, Fergus is up here supporting this from the government sort of side of things. And I suppose some of the key words we've already been hearing is it's all about the people, mindsets, people, and practical actions. So the focus that we have, and I'm going to use, Sarah's coined a sort of couple of words already today, the thing. It's sort of after the thing has been decided what is going to be built. And then our focus in this sort of improvement work stream is that life cycle afterwards. So I think Fergus is very clear. We're not going to be looking at planning and DCO processes. That's the government to sort out.
Yes, and that's something that will be done through the normal process of project development and then the business case evaluation process. What we really wanted to focus on in this work stream is actions that you can take from the point at which you have decided to embark on a particular project, and how do you deliver that in the most efficient and effective way in order to deliver the best quality outcomes.
Yeah, so that's our work stream. As Andy was saying, what can we take control of and actually action? Everything from whether it's a negotiated contract bidding, pre-construction, into the manufacture, supply and build, into commissioning and operations. And we have set up a steering group, action group, and it does cover government, clients and the delivery supply chain. So really pleased it has that broad integration. We're looking at the metrics that we're looking at for government productivity and programme delivery. And importantly, we've been very keen to make sure we're interfacing with various groups. So, member of the Productivity Cab for the Institute of Civil Engineers, we've got the ICG, we've got this CLC, I3P, I could go on, I could name every acronym if you like, but there's plenty of groups and it's trying to coalesce that into these practical actions that we're actually going to be sort of taking. So we've honed this down through a round table and a couple of round tables into some key sort of work streams around this. And one of them is standards and practices. It's that common language, common processes that we're going to use within the sector and capability we're going to build. One of them is standards adoption. Fergus is very keen on not just developing another standard, but are we actually using the ones we've got?
Yeah, and there are a myriad of standards that have been developed over the years that can be applied in the context of the built environment or are specifically designed for the built environment. The most obvious and high-profile example is probably now the ISO 19650 standard for BIM, but that builds on a number of standards that have previously been developed over 20 years to get to the point at which it exists now. And what we see is that there's an awful lot of scope to make more use of standards during the project development phase, during the procurement phase, and then during the delivery phase, to drive that focus on quality, but also to give people that common collective understanding of what good looks like in a particular context, that then drives more effective collaboration and integration between all the different actors in the supply chain.
And just the final third point is that design and procurement integration, whether it's designing for manufacturing assembly to lead to modern methods of construction, the supply chain development, or target value designs. The second work stream is all around skills and capability. Having that productivity skill set deployed widely within government, really pleased with looking at the client's development framework and where that links into productivity and what needs to be bolstered into that, and how we can get down the supply chain. Andy's mentioned national highways. They're probably getting quite a few shout outs today, but looking at, within the supply chain, how we get from first tiers into the second and third tiers. One example is we've got some workshops, leadership workshops with national highways that we're running. We have about 40 tier 2 suppliers coming to these activities. And cultural leadership, we've talked about that, but leadership to create the environment, also at different levels, right down to supervisors. We use a lot of sport analogies in what we do. When you're looking at whether it's heads at rugby, there's lots of different leaders on a pitch. There's different leaders and leadership skills required. That early contractor engagement and the link between continuous improvement and innovation. Really key that whether we're talking big things or little things or micro, but those daily, weekly innovations in how people are working are driven. So we're sort of mobilizing thousands of people in organizations, maybe several thousand if it's Balfour's, but in hundreds in other organizations to all be looking for improvements in productivity. And we have set some sort of short-term goals, is that by the next tip, which is aiming to be in November, I believe, anyway, hopefully that's quite right. But around that time, we've got some exemplars underway, building on MOJ, highways and other areas, and breaking it down by sectors. The standards, as Fergus says, are mapped, and any gaps we can look at, but also why we're not necessarily adopting them. A really clearly defined competency framework for productivity, common practices being deployed, as we said, across sort of national highways or wherever, and design and procurement integration is really practiced, and examples of the benefits have been seen. So that's us. Thank you.
Hello. Very dark when you're up here, isn't it? So this is not Jennifer, as I think we've established. So we're going to roll with it, I think, aren't we? Do you want me to sort of go for it?
I'd like you to take control, Ron, if that's okay.
You may very well regret that. So I'm Ron Lang. I'm a regional director at Atkins Realis, but I'm here today with my Construction Leadership Council hat on. I chair what is the new Industrialised Construction Working Group, bit of a mouthful. Anyone that knows me or has listened to me speak knows that asking me to speak for 5 minutes is frankly laughable, so we'll see how we go. I've got loads of notes that I'm almost sure I'm going to ignore as well, so we'll see how we go. Right, so what's this all about? So Sarah very usefully set this case out for me so we can save a little bit of time here, but I'm on a bit of a, I guess, warpath might be a bit strong, but I'm really, really encouraged already to have heard the word industrialisation mentioned multiple times today. So I feel like I'm in good company. We've heard systems thinking, outcome-based decision-making, and so on and so forth. I'm really, really keen to make sure that we reframe our approach to industrialisation effectively. So we know, as we've heard, that the case for change is simple, that, let's put it fairly simplistically, it cannot be possible that we deliver all the things that we deliver and need to reinvent the wheel every time we do it. That cannot be true or possible. And Case had this a number of times. it leads to inefficiency, it leads to unpredictability, and it limits our ability to continuously improve. And I will also draw your attention to the difference potentially between kind of economic infrastructure and social infrastructure. When you look at the productivity figures for each of those, they're actually very, very different. Building delivery is exceptionally poor in terms of productivity compared to linear equivalents. So what's the message we're trying to get at here? Is that industrialization, someone mentioned earlier, how do we define this? We've been working really, really hard to try and simplify, I guess, how we think about that. That's really, really trying to say, when you look across a pipeline of work, can we see repeatable technical systems? Can we see repeatable standard processes? And can we see long-term stable relationships across the pipeline? That requires us to step back from the project that we're all obsessed and trained in, to think about that one specific thing and how best to deliver it, and start to think about how we deliver pipelines and programs of social infrastructure. That's how we move forward. So where does platform come into this? So I was formerly Chief Technical Officer of the Construction Innovation Hub. We spent a long time, I think 5, almost 6 years in total really, looking at what the platform approach, which originally was kind of introduced really by IPA, what did it mean for construction? How did it help? And effectively, when you talk about industrialization being that, technical systems, processes, and people, and trying to drive some consistency in that, you can see that platform approaches embody that approach. So within Construction Leadership Council and within that Industrialised Construction Working Group, we're very much framing our work this year around how do we drive the uptake of platform approaches as a route to more industrialised delivery of social infrastructure. I got through that in one go. Did you see that?
That was brilliant.
Yeah.
No breath or anything.
Well,
Amazing.
yeah, I can't breathe today anyway. So we know that the whole idea of platforms is not just that you create standard things over and over again. It's not cookie cutter, but it's trying to look for where you can drive commonality across a range of products and assets effectively. And of course, what we're all trying to do, and I have a background in the sort of value toolkit space, this is all about outcomes. So the reason I like the built environment model, the lighthouse model, is that it starts with outcomes and then you drive it from there. So what industrialization looks like for us in the UK will depend on the outcomes we want to drive. Do we want consolidation? Do we want SMEs, et cetera, et cetera? We have to know the outcomes we're trying to drive to understand the shape of an industrialized delivery model in the future. And that's a key point before I move on to the next slide. This is about delivery model transformation. This isn't technical change. This isn't, well, if we have robots and factories, then everything will be great. This is that our delivery model currently is focused on reinvention. It's focused on one at a time, work out how best to deliver it. It isn't focused on delivering pipelines of very, very critical social infrastructure. I should nod to the value of platform, shouldn't I there?
You should. I was just going to point out that the reason Jennifer was going to be here was because she was going to briefly touch on our 2 round tables that we'd had with a sort of wider selection of the market, including Ron and Kevin Masters and various people from industry. And from that, we've not just got the problem statement reiterated, we have defined some key areas, and they all fit under 3 themes that we need to address and improve together. The theme 1 is culture of trust and the subsets of things that we need to do to feed into that. Theme 2 is consistencies across departments and seeing the not the seen differences but the unseen similarities. And the third theme is aggregating demand where we can across the piece. So I just thought I'd touch on that because that's the IPA bit, the transforming infrastructure performance bit, where we're trying to draw in all of your expertise across sectors and across the market to inform how we do change our culture and our approaches. And
I think that's the encouraging part, is that a lot of what I'm saying is often taken negatively. So the presumption in favour of offsite, I'm not going to say the other one. For me, it's very, very narrowly focused, but the conversations that we're having are not about how do you take a bespoke thing and run it through a factory and then wonder why factories are perhaps not performing as well as they should. It's about how do you actually start to industrialise a delivery model, which enables us to use manufacturing technology, which enables us to be more productive. So I'm really encouraged by the sorts of conversations that we've been having. What I also wanted to try and do, though, to finish off, was explain how the Construction Leadership Council is going to help. So really, really pleased to announce that having spoken to the Construction Innovation Hub, so you all know that that programme came to an end, we are going to be taking forward what was the product platform rulebook and creating what else? It has to be a playbook, right? A platform playbook. And there's a really, really good reason for this. So we have a lot of people in the Construction Leadership Council, Industrialised Construction Working Group, well, I'm going to have to acronymise that somehow, who worked in this space. And we continue to work collaboratively together, even though the hub isn't there anymore. we've been trying to do this stuff. We've been trying these concepts for real in the public and the private sector. We're ready to move it forward now. And we've been listening, particularly to public sector clients, but to all clients as to, what do you need from us, really? So what this group will do and what the platform playbook will do, too many Ps, is to try and bring this to a wider audience. So it needs to set out, so where we're trying to go, what does this future industrialized sort of platform-enabled state look like? It will drive some proper common terminology and sort of language frameworks. It sounds really boring, but it's important. Language is everything. It will set out what conditions clients need to create to make this work. And again, that's not in the project. That is outside the project at a pipeline level. And it will also try and introduce a form of maturity matrix so clients can look at their programs and portfolios and understand whether they're on the right path. So MOJ has been mentioned a few times. And what's really encouraging about MOJ, and if you look at the House Block program as an example, we can see the features of industrialization there. We can see they've taken a programmatic approach to technical systems. We can see that they've now got some standard processes. It's not, it's not all there. And we can see that they've got some long-term relationships. So, final note, the Construction Leadership Council is really pleased to try and support IPA with this and to produce this platform playbook as a means to moving this agenda forwards.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I invite all 6 presenters to come to the stage, and we're going to take questions. Again, there is a roving mic. Do introduce yourself and then do share your question with us. While we get ready for those questions from the audience, I have one of my own for the panel. I'm particularly interested, obviously within the room we will have clients, we will have procurers, we will have designers, we will have a whole host of expertise and different sort of representation from across the industry. And so my question is, what would you like to ask them to do differently tomorrow, particularly in light of the fact that we've spoken a lot about the UN SDGs, about the outcomes? We know that we've already reduced carbon in the UK, our carbon emissions, by about 50%, but that, to some degree, was the easy work. We've offshored some of it, we've looked at the grid, and now comes the really hard work when we think about every single project from now on. How do we get to net zero? We know we have social value challenges. How do we address those through our projects in terms of employment, in terms of outcomes? We know under planning law that the focus is increasingly on biodiversity net gain. So how will we ask the audience members to do things differently to increase biodiversity net gain and move us from this deficit into positives? And we also know, with last year being over 1.5 degrees, or an average of 1.5 degrees, and the direction of travel the warmer, wetter weathers, the new norms that we have to adapt to, and the resilience for the extreme events that are increasingly coming our way, what would you ask the audience members to do differently? Fergus, would you like to join the stage? So I'll start at the end, if I may. So Ron, what would be your request for a procurer or a client in the audience?
Yeah, thanks. I think I referenced the Value Toolkit stuff, and I was obviously heavily involved in that for a number of years. But I think the broader movement around outcome-based decision-making, I alluded to it earlier. So this idea that if we can be clear on our outcomes and our values that we're trying to drive as a sector, everything follows. I really believe it. And I think we did a lot of work with individual clients to try and understand what value meant to them. So we called it sort of the value definition process, really. And it was really, really eye-opening because we had a majority of clients were saying, thank you for having this conversation. We never at the earliest possible stage actually all sit round, a group of stakeholders, and agree and even prioritise what's most important to us. Mm-hmm. And that might be, and there's 2 ways to look at that. One is what we need from the thing we're delivering, the usual thing word. And one is what we want from the process of delivering it. And those 2 things are slightly different. One is about the shape of the industry and how it looks and the value it adds to society and all those kind of things. And one is about the assets and the built environment we leave behind. So to answer the question, I'll have an attempt. It's almost a question back. Who is it that's responsible on the government side or the public sector side for actually starting to set and have some more alignment and transparency over the outcomes we're really trying to drive? Because I think from a private sector point of view, if you point us in the direction of the outcomes you're trying to drive, we are exceptionally good at getting you to that. But we're currently not asked to deliver outcomes, we're asked to deliver lowest cost, and usually, the quickest rate we possibly can. So be clear on the outcomes you want to drive, and you will get the solution that you need.
Thank you, Ron. I think one for Stephen there that we can perhaps pick up later. And I wonder if I can just move along there. Sarah, any thoughts from yourself?
I actually think we need to be better at defining, as Ron says, that the outcomes that we want. But we need to put these things very much up front in terms of how we end up contracting. Because there's a lot, obviously I'm sort of thinking it in the slightly contractual legal sense of the word, but actually if we don't ask for, we need this building to perform to a certain standard in order to ensure that it's operationally net zero, then that's not necessarily going to be the thing that we get, because people are, as you say, driven to bid against contracts, to bid for contracts, and there is a cost element. So the point is, you can't be asked to do something after the event. You've got to be asked to do it at the beginning and be involved, perhaps, in the collaboration that gets you to that end point.
Thank you. Mark?
Yes, so I guess our perspective on everything is how can we do things better, faster and more efficiently. So if we're taking on those side of things, if I was to look at it from a client and then a procurement point of view, it is for the client to be really challenging of everything that's gone before, really open to whatever we've done before, we can do it better. And that procurement is to sort of get the contractors in early, the designers, and really go to town on the programme. What can we pull apart and look for every opportunity, every stone turned as to what can be done better. I do think actually the sector can be a lot better. There's lots of room for improvement. So there is that challenge. And I think that's the key thing. There's lots of room for improvement. Be open and then be that informed client and then doesn't just sort of throw something over the wall. We're going to stay involved all the way through, whether it's change we're going to manage, right through to the commissioning and handover. How do we want it handed over? So we're in it at the start as a client with procurement. I keep saying that quite negatively, but procurement. And then they're going to see it all the way through. And they're going to allow or facilitate everyone to look for every opportunity to be better.
Thank you, Mark. And Kay, thinking about those outcomes that we want to drive, in the audience we've got some deep expertise. What would you ask people to go back and do differently tomorrow?
I think we need to start to see constraints as opportunities. A lot of what we're doing now, constraints will always be there. So unless we can start to maximize the opportunity with what we've already got, then we'll always be limited by what we can do. Because actually constraints is what drive innovation and creativity and allows us to do things better and more efficiently and productively. Of course, if there's too much constraint, then we start to cut corners, and too little, I think we become a little bit reckless. But we all need to work together. It's not just a client job or a contractor's job or the supplier's job. We all have a responsibility to challenge each other because we all want this. So let's hold each other accountable for what we're trying to deliver.
Thank you. Gaynor?
Yeah, I think just building on what Kay said, really, I think for me, it is about that collaboration, and it's not just about going to your big contractors and saying, Mr. Contractor, please can you help with this? Because they're just going to contract that down the supply chain for the problems to be solved elsewhere. So I think it's about engaging a much wider audience than we're doing at the moment. We're sitting in those echo chambers, and it's not, with all the will in the world, you're not going to change industry if you don't get industry involved. So I think starting with the SMEs, the people, and building those businesses from the ground up is really important. I think when we talk about productivity, we talk about MMC. If you look at other examples when industrialisation has worked terribly well, it's when that early, bottom of the chain, supply chain, have been brought in and they've been invested in. They see what's coming down the line, they see the potential for growth, and therefore they'll be more engaged. And then on the skills front, there's so many crises we could talk about, but on the skills front, really, truly looking at the education system and saying we have the majority of people that come into our industry by accident. And those people are kinesthetic learners, they're quite often very practical, they're creative, they're problem solvers. We should harness that. We shouldn't knock that out of them in the education system. That's a superpower for me, and it's awesome for our industry. So putting people at the core of everything we do.
Thank you. And Fergus?
For me, I think there are two fundamental problems that you have to solve. The first is around capability, and then the second is around culture. And in terms of capability, I think what that means is a different approach to project management. I don't think you can simply create outcome specifications, however good they are, and give them to the current supply chain administered via covenant, procurement and contractual management structures and get those outcomes delivered unless you are prepared in parallel to create a much more collaborative culture and one where actually clients and firms within the supply chain work together collaboratively to build everybody's capability, knowledge and skills in terms of being able to deliver these projects. And I think if you start with that approach to communication, collaboration, empowerment, then you're actually going to shift the dial on the thing which really needs to change, which is the industry culture, which needs to move away from one which is largely focused on the individual project, the individual firm, even the individual employee on the site, to one where people understand that they are part of a team and they are working to deliver the best possible outcome collectively. And that's the point that the industry needs to get to.
Thank you, Fergus. And do put your hand up if you do have any questions. I'm particularly interested, Sarah, if I can come to you, in that tension, to build on Fergus's point there, about that need for collaboration, which you also reiterated and echoed. And you also spoke about policing the construction playbook. So I'm interested in the tension there, and I wonder if you could explore that a little.
Well, I suppose it's actually policing it from the public sector side of the table in terms of what we actually, when we say what we need. And the collaboration at the front end, because I'm very much into consulting with the market before you even start. So consulting on your documents, consulting on your needs and requirements. I've done this on numerous occasions, and actually, if you do that, you get some really, really valuable feedback in terms of what your plans are. And if then, that this, and I really like Andy's move to the left. Let's kind of contractor, but let's all move to the left and get involved early on and really collaborate at that level. If we can change processes to allow that, I think that just drives. It's all about kind of understanding and clarity around the requirements and the outcomes from the earliest point in time. And I think within any kind of program or project. So I actually think those things kind of go hand in hand. But if we allow programs and projects from a central government perspective to progress on, and actually not implement those early contractor involvement things, which we do every day, then actually we're not going to get any better at this, because we're constantly allowing programs to go ahead doing what we've done before.
Just on the word policing, it's...
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah. But change needs support, change needs driving and needs administration. We tend to use a couple of words, process confirmation, for all the things we put in, because things do need checking, that they've embedded or they've been sustained and then they're not falling away. So it's not a negative. Policing maybe is a little bit harsh, but supportive, process confirmation that they are being embedded and they're being used. And if they're not, what's going to help us do it?
But calling it out, the
calling it out.
whatever, you...
And on.
Sorry, I won't try any Japanese ever again.
That's why we don't use them.
I know, but I enjoyed it at the time.
And Ron, if I can come to you.
I've been hesitating. The move left thing has been an interesting conversation over quite a period of time. We have a sort of left of zero principle in our own organisation. Where I think it falls short is when people assume that moving left means moving left in the project. And I think there's a place for that, but what I'm trying to find is the space where you can move left of the programme or of the portfolio. Because I think, again, we're allowing a lot of autonomy at the local level. I'm trying not to use specific programme examples here. So much autonomy at the sort of project-specific asset level, and we're not allowing a space at the front end to say, okay, if you're going to deliver 10 of these things or 20 of these things or thousands of these things, how would we develop those things we're going to repeatedly use and continuously improve? So one of the things I'm really keen to understand is how do we create that space? Because, as industry, I think we unfairly say, well, who's going to pay us for that work? We need to be paid in this project environment where there's a thing we're going to build and we get paid for building that thing. Who pays for that upfront collaboration around the repeatable stuff we're all going to share? And that's raised all sorts of challenges around intellectual property, design liability. There's a whole host of things that, again, in the CLC space we're having a look at. But I think it's maybe a challenge for anyone who wants to come and find me afterwards. But how do we create that space, and how do we pay for that space to develop the repeatable stuff we want to then continuously improve and deploy? It's just a challenge around moving left.
Thank you. And a last question from me before we wrap up for the morning. The United Nations have called for deep, rapid and sustained cuts to carbon if we are to have a livable future. We've spoken a lot this morning about behavioural change, about culture, about the need to be collaborative and to do things differently, rapidly. And there's been some great nuggets that I've heard this morning about signposting to really useful documents that are already out there. Ron, I'll suggest yours. You mentioned the Value Toolkit, a great document that has been published. So I'd just like to go along the panel and say, what piece of advice or reference documentation or guidance would you like to refer to? And Fergus, if I start at this end, is there a particular document that you would like to signpost everyone to that you feel is a bit underused?
Not one that's necessarily underused, but one that I think is very good, important, worthwhile, and people should be familiar with. I will go with PAS 2080 because it links in with my previous comments on standards as well.
Gaynor.
I think we've got so many tools and guidance documents out there, and I think there's some that are better than others. I think the construction playbook's amazing. We should be policing it. We should be ensuring it does happen. I think it's just down to the people. Let's stop reading and let's start doing.
Lovely, thank you, Kay.
Yeah, same. There's so many processes and guidance and standards out there. I think there's 3,500 standards for the construction industry. Where do we even start? I think that the main thing is to focus on people. If we connect with each other, we can learn lessons from each other. There's so much knowledge and wealth within this room and also the groups that we're part of. So start bringing people together and talk about the lessons, the best practice that we can all apply today.
Thank you. Mark?
Just a bit of maybe self-promotion. In fact, we have a very short 2-page document that I've spoken to Fergus, is undervalued, if you like, because we talk a lot about values and everything. The thing that we don't see enough of is the focus on waste. Waste in everything that everybody does, at every level of an organisation. And if we just flipped for everybody to be looking, and I don't mean packaging waste,
no.
we mean proper operational waste. If everybody in your organisation was walking around, understood what waste is, leadership waste, service waste and production waste, and was just trying to rip it out and get rid of it, we would have a much more productive environment and collaborative and a bunch of problem solvers.
Thank you.
Oh, that's really good. It's quite hard to follow you now.
No pressure, Sarah.
So I can't think of one specific document, but there is there's so much out there. The UK Green Buildings Council that if you go on their website and you look at all of the resources and all of the things that that are on there just for you to dip into. I mean, I have some personal experience of this just because when I was running a school rebuilding programme in Wales, which was the last programme I ran, I really, really pushed for all the schools to be net zero in ops and have an embodied carbon target. And I worked with my M&E consultants, and literally they had to sit there while I asked them stupid questions like, well, so how do you do that? What does that mean? And actually in the end, we were looking at things like heat scavenging, point of view, all the things that, what do you do after you've made it net zero in ops? What can you do to even, to kind of make net gains out of ICT, heat, and all those sort of things. All that stuff's on, you can find that just through UK Green Buildings Council. So it's out there already. Let's, and let's collaborate more and share good practice and good stories.
Great, thank you. Ron?
I mean, you've slightly helped me out. I guess I have two parts of my brain. I think there's probably more than two, but I can only manage two at a time. One is around industrialisation. So of course I'm an industrialist, if you want to call it that. And that's for all the reasons I've mentioned before. And I think the product platform rulebook that we're going to build on this year is still worth going back, and even if you skim or you look at the front end of it, try to set out this sort of industrialisation agenda. However, the other space I frame, which is much more important in some respects, is this outcome-based decision-making space. So you mentioned the value toolkit. That was absolutely the start of a very important journey for the construction industry on how we make more outcome-based decisions. But it spawns you into a different area. So these are not industry documents, but books like Donut Economics by Kate Raworth, or stuff like Thinking in Systems, Donella Meadows. That idea of systems thinking that Stephen mentioned at the start, I think is something that's really lost in construction. And I think, going back to the education point that someone made earlier, we're not trained as built environment professionals where we understand what the built environment system is and how it works, and the fact that construction is only ever changing a bit or adding a bit or taking a bit away. So I think we need to get better at this systems thinking, and I think that underpins anything else we look at. So to bring it back to the start of that point, what industrialisation looks like, the shape of the sector we want, the assets we want to deliver, are all determined by the outcomes we need from that system. So I would probably point people in that direction.
Ron, what a great point to end on, and two of my favourite books as well. So thank you all. Just to recap on the morning, what an amazing morning we've had. I'd like, first of all, to thank all of the panellists. So please help me with a round of applause.